Jetzt bei Taco Fashion 20% auf Jacken und Westen, aber nur für kurze Zeit. Sichere dir deine Lieblingsjacke oder Weste im Store oder online auf taco.com und spare 20%. Taco Fashion, zu günstig zum Weitersagen. Jetzt bei Taco Fashion 20% auf Jacken und Westen, aber nur für kurze Zeit. Sichere dir deine Lieblingsjacke oder Weste im Store oder online auf taco.com und spare 20%. Taco Fashion, zu günstig zum Weitersagen.
The Nigerian Economic Summit Group, in its role as connector, dialogue partner, watchdog, and intervener,
when you first start business, your target is to make your first million.
Seeks to change the narrative and trajectory of the Nigerian economy. Together with our partners, we're not just solving problems, but preventing them, because when advocacy succeeds, the nation transforms for the better. But advocacy is for the strong. It takes fact-based inputs, resilience, partnerships, courage, and a lot of heroes. So be our hero. Subscribe to our channel, listen to our messages, and engage with us. Together, we can transform Nigerian lives, communities, and businesses. Welcome to the NESG Radio. It's good to be back on NESG Radio, syndicated podcast in the national interest. I'm your host, Yinka Nyolakon. Today we'll be diving into the colorful world called the orange economy. Thematically, our dialogue is on the billion-dollar industry called gaming. Oh, you heard me right, gaming. My guest today is Mr. Yahya Maikori. Yahya is an attorney with core expertise in gaming, sports, technology, media, intellectual property, and e-commerce. He chairs the Recreation and Sports Committee of the Nigerian Bar Association. In 2013, Yahya was inducted into the International Masters of Gaming Law, IMGL, which is an invite-only organization on gaming and for gaming professionals. Welcome, Yahya.
Thank you very much, Inka.
Thanks for being here. When people hear gaming, they think probably computer games. Some even think betting. So can you break down what that is for us? What is gaming in your own words?
It won't be my own words, it'll be in what the industry perceives to be gaming. So
that's totally fine.
Gaming is an euphemism for both gaming in terms of video games and then gambling in terms of betting and other like games. So I think that, like much earlier, years back, there was basically a rush of legislation against gaming because of the perception of how injurious it was to the public and lack of control in terms of addiction, other related vices, yeah. So I think that's where the name changed from gambling to gaming, but it's really still gambling. And as things evolve, you find out that even the gaming, which is video games, and even the gambling are coming to merge and become one and the same. So in a short while from now, you won't really be able to make a distinction between the two. But yeah, gaming really is more about video games and as well as gambling. But gambling really is a game of chance, and it simply means that you are not exerting any kind of skill for you to win. That's what gambling is all about. But game of skills like poker, chess, these are also games as well, but obviously there's some skill set required for you to engage in it. So basically that's it. In other countries, especially in the Nigerian law, the National Lottery Act says lottery, gaming or gaming lottery,
yeah.
And it means both games of chance and games of skill. But in other climes, it's really more of games of chance.
Right. Thank you very much. I think that gives us a background, to the upcoming conversation. I mentioned earlier that it's a billion-dollar industry across the world, and it continues to push the boundaries of technology and entertainment. What is the potential for the gaming industry in Nigeria?
Yeah, so most of us growing up, at least in the 80s, I don't know what generation that is. We're involved in video games. I mean, now it used to be the Sega. Now it's moved to our phones. Almost everybody has a phone, and almost all the phones have all types of manners of games.
Mobile games.
Yeah, if you go to social media, Facebook has its own games. Almost everybody has its own games. I think Spotify also has games.
Absolutely.
Which other platform? Netflix has games as well. I think they're about to start doing it. So really, it's become ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's accessible, and it's part of popular culture. And with technology and broadband and devices and gadgets available, everybody gets to play. So the potentials, you cannot even imagine. 5-6 years ago, at a function in Amsterdam, and some guy who was the chairman of Thomas Cook Travels, then basically told us, see, this industry is probably going to be the second biggest industry in the next 10 years. It didn't make sense to me then. That was 5 years ago. Now it's become pretty clear. Let's look at esports. So esports is not gambling in the real sense of it, but we have moved basically most of our games and the video games to where they become competitive now. And in Asia, of course, you know, that's a huge thing.
Right.
So, but what makes esports so big is that it's not physical. Almost everybody grew up playing some kind of video games, whether it's using the console or using your phone. And so you have more people participating as opposed to other games where there's a physical element to it, there's a fitness element to it, you know. So I think the next few years, once technology becomes cheaper in terms of broadband, in terms of better phones,
and accessibility,
virtual reality, you're going to see almost everybody involved in it. That means the same way we're all involved in social media is probably the same way all of us are going to be involved in gaming, you know. Absolutely. So if you take it from that point, then you can see how humongous this industry's potential is going to be. Yeah, I think what has changed the dynamic is in terms of payment. Because about 3-4 years ago, there were lots of betting companies in Nigeria and many other African countries. With payment, with the fintechs and what they have done so far, I think that has basically opened the doors to this possibility. What it actually simply means that with cheaper broadband and with 5G being implemented in Nigeria and a few other countries, it means that you can play virtually loads of people
all over the world.
Yes, so lots of competition will be taking place simultaneously, and many people are going to make their living from just gaming. I forgot to add that the same guy still said, you know what, why he was positing that game was going to become bigger because with technology there'll be more unemployment, because many people with lesser skill sets for this new economy are going to be totally isolated from this industry. And what it means is that many more people, because of lack of work, are going to have to depend on gaming to make a living. The good thing about it is they could do it virtually in the comfort of your bedroom and play with almost anybody anywhere in the world.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, the potentials are, you cannot even put a figure to it.
They're huge. If you look at games that, you know, you mentioned the 80s, you know, games like IO, games like What, you know, some that are local, some that are, you know, West African games. All of them are digitized now, and you can find it on the phone and you can play with anybody around the world. Yeah, I mean, so if you look at the value chain of it, of the industry, I think that's where it becomes much clearer to us what the opportunities are. You know, most of the focus so far has been on those who are playing, but what else is beneath that whole industry? What supports that superstructure that supports the industry? That's what we need, and it become much clearer for us. You took it right out of my mouth. I was going to go right next into the value chain. Yeah. You know, it has broadened, and there's been a great shift in the structure. So how has the value chain changed, and can you take us through it, what it would look like, or what it looks like right now?
So in a bit of our research, we found out that there's this popular game that our parents used to play in the village. Yeah. It's called Ayo. Is it Ayo? Yeah.
On a wooden board.
On a wooden board, yeah. We found out that across Africa, almost all African civilizations had that particular game.
Right.
It ran across Africa. But unfortunately, I don't think we have really digitized that game.
Not fully.
Not fully. Well, you know, whether we are losing that as part of our culture is something that we need to find out. But in terms of the value chain, it don't want to even start. So when we started, or when I started consulting in this industry about 5, 6, 7 years ago, everything was strictly retail, you know. So things have changed now. I mean, I think with COVID, there's been a shift. We can actually even talk about the 50-50 online, 50% retail. That's the level of engagement now. If we talk about the value chain, we need to look at even advertisements. I mean, that's humongous. If you look at in Kenya, the biggest contributor to the advertising sector is those in the betting industry. Right. So much competition, so much money being put out there just for advertisements. So you look at copywriters and people advertising, and that's a huge industry.
Artists, audiovisual
graphics, you know, it goes on and on. Yeah. Let's look at websites because we want to make the websites more interactive. Let's look at software. Software is very important. I think that's where we're lagging behind. If you look at almost all the gaming engines in Africa now are really imported ones. And I think that's really where the money is being lost. You know,
For licensing, right?
Yeah, of course, you're paying your licensing fees, so that's where most of the money is being lost. And yet we have very good game developers, so that's something we need to look at. We have just advised a company which is based in Vietnam, but they were amazed at the kind of talents we have in Nigeria, and they set them strictly for game development, for the foreign market. So again, that's where most of the operators lose their money. And when we had the foreign exchange problem about 2-3 years ago, many were stuck because they couldn't pay their licensing fees, and that definitely impacted on their bottom line. And most of these fees are actually paid in foreign exchange. So you can imagine what they're going through now. If you entered an agreement in Forex, and now you have to pay this kind of margin. And
the margins keep, expanding.
Yes. If you look at this, you go on there, let's look about even the competition. The competition is a huge part of it. Events, just tourism, the conference events is huge. We brought the first event in terms of sports betting. I was involved in that. Then we brought the biggest operator about 4 or 5 years ago. We had the first event in Nigeria here, then Kenya, and obviously they settled in South Africa. But the main event happens in February in London, with about 35,000 people coming in a period of 3 days.
Wow.
You can imagine how much that is in terms of tickets, participation fees, advertising, all of that stuff, So even the event is huge, because what you need to do is create a marketplace.
Yeah.
And that's the easiest way to go about it. So payment, again, is a huge thing. What you find is that some of the payment companies are already getting involved in gaming in one way or the other. They might say, so that's one of the verticals they've got into. But I think that's changed the game. Once they started noticing that these figures were showing up, they also started reaching out to us. Who do you know? How do you know? At one point, that was the key focus of their marketing, the gaming companies.
Everyone wants a piece of the pie.
Everyone a piece of the pie. It's a huge turnover business. You understand? Of course, training again is another big thing. Training is a humongous thing. I mean, if you look at the turnover of companies in Nigeria in terms of those who have invested in sports betting particularly, you see turnover is very high because people get into it without the right kind of experience or education. So educating people is a very big thing. And I know companies are listed from just training people in the gambling sector, So you can go on and on and on.
And payments, event, training.
A lot, yeah. So when people talk about gaming, they all think of only the competition or with the gross revenues.
Right.
But there's a whole lot happening out there. In short, they also say that broadband is one of the benefits of gaming because you need broadband to do that. Yeah. So, yeah, it's enormous and it just goes on and on. Our company was involved, sold for 9%. At almost $200-300 million.
Wow.
A Nigerian company, just recently. Without the details of the transactions not known to all of us, but that was the valuation. And I can bet that most of the valuation had to do with their technology and the software they're running. So these are things we need to look at and focus on and look beyond just the fact that people are putting money together too.
Right. Definitely something to look at. Right, and it adds a lot to the economy, provides jobs, of course, for all of these people that you've mentioned, and the potential is enormous. Let's now look at it, a part of it, which you talked about, the worry that people have about the gaming industry. There's a concept called responsible gaming. Yeah. Can this economic impact that you've mentioned, can it be used to improve the public perceptions, of the industry?
Yeah, so I think there's a failure on our own part in terms of the industry practitioners not to have pushed that. That should be at the forefront of any regulator, any operator, in terms of responsible gambling. We all know human beings. We know our propensity to indulge in vices. And that happens almost everywhere. We have seen people, let's talk about alcohol. We've seen what Alcoholic Anonymous has done. We talk about driving, just even normal driving, how people, road rage and all of that stuff. We have the Federal Safety Corps. So, and even in terms of even businesses that are perceived to be just legitimate businesses and businesses like even banks, we've seen what some people. So in any human endeavor, there's a propensity for human beings to either abuse it or
to be excessive.
Yes. So that has always been the scare, especially for the gambling industry. And responsible gambling was a response to that scare. Now, we haven't improved on it. We haven't not really, at least in Africa, and most of Nigeria particularly, I don't think there's been that organized effort to enforce it.
Right.
in Kenya, but they felt the backlash, and that's why the government increased the taxes from basic, I can't remember what tax, to something excessive, because the pain was that so many kids wake up in the morning, the first thing that you find them doing was in the gambling house, you understand? So there are rules, there are established rules and regulations on what, who and where you can gamble, what times, you understand? Even family members are meant to be responsible for their fellow people,
right.
you know? So I think that's a clarion call for regulators. Even the operators themselves, you don't have to wait for
you to be regulated.
Yeah, because you know that at the end of the day, you have to look at the lifetime value of a customer. You don't want to, use up whatever he has, and then he's not able to come to patronize it again. So you can see that's the backlash that took place in Kenya. In Uganda, they stopped issuing new licenses, you know. And that's what happens when we do not hold or we don't enforce responsible gambling. Then we leave that narrative to the public, and the public then is free to interpret it the way they want to print it. And that's why it's not unusual to see such headlines like somebody commits suicide for losing his boss's 1,000 naira.
Right.
You understand? So I think if there's anything that a regulator should do, especially those who see the future in the industry, is to enforce that. Even in the non-gambling gaming, that's even just video games, we have seen kids abuse video games. So it's human nature, but we must implement. There are safety guards, there are all sorts of technology, rules, regulations, guidelines in place. We just need to enforce them. We can adopt them and enforce them.
Absolutely, definitely. That's a good point. Now let's take a bird's eye view. Let's take a step back, because you're involved in more than gaming, you're involved in media and a lot of other things across the creative industry.
Yeah.
You know, this is very important. You know, the stats are out there on the potential of this industry. You know, how can we, drive these things responsibly? You talked about how gaming affects tourism, affects a lot of other industry. How can we create linkages and provide the right enabling environment for all of these industries, the ones that are less risky, less addictive, but, how can we, coalesce this to make it a lot better and provide jobs and growth in Nigeria?
Yeah, well, I think first, and I won't say it's government, I think the private sector has taken initiative in terms of the creative industry, media, all of that stuff. We have done most of this, we have achieved what we have achieved with little or no government intervention. But again, government still has a role in terms of creating the enabling environment, laws, regulation, guidelines, things that help build these industries. I think most important is for government to even understand exactly how these industries are interlinked. They are not separate industries. Let me ask me, what's the biggest game changer in all of these related industries? It's convergence. They all converge on just one thing: technology, broadband. Simple. So you can find out on one platform you can do a multitude of things. It's convergence. And if that's the case, then what we need to do is look at how we can build hubs, or look at, first of all, start with policies that anybody in those related industries can benefit from. We have paid lip service to entertainment, to media, to creative industries, but we still don't understand exactly how that plays out.
Yeah.
I will just quickly add that the underlying issue among all of this is intellectual property. And so you can have all the creative industry funds available for people. Most of these young kids don't have any assets. They cannot justify using proper real estate asset for an intangible asset.
Right. Unless
you get to a point in our country when you realize that this industry really is the future of the growth of this country, and we go into the basics. Let's understand intellectual property. Let the people in the legal system understand the importance of it when somebody is trying to enforce his legal rights. Let people understand that with my intellectual property, at least it has some value. I can take it and get some kind of financing. It might not be $1 billion financing, but at least you'll be able to get me something to do. I think those are kind of initiatives that happen in India, and that's why the Bollywood is a humongous industry right now, and is a revenue earner for them.
Right.
So let's understand the importance of intellectual property, because all of these are related. The underlying security or ownership-based intellectual property. We need to understand it, we need to make provisions for it, and we need to incentivize people in that sector.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Mr. Yahya Maikori. He's an attorney with expertise in gaming. You've heard it. Gaming, technology, intellectual property, the media, all-round expert. It's been fantastic having you here today, and I'm sure a lot of people have learned a lot about what you have to say, to act responsibly, to game responsibly, and to also add to the industry to build it for the better of the Nigerian economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me here. My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to our content today. Remember to subscribe to the NESG Radio. Follow us across all social media channels and visit our website www.nesgroup.org/NESG Radio. NESG, in the national interest.